Alright, for this game dev session, I'll be working on my Pikmin test project that I've been working on for the past several weeks. And I'm going to be working on the plucking mechanic, so that I can actually pluck the Pikmin out of the ground as you normally do in the games, instead of just whistling them, which has been a placeholder. So I'll just go ahead and get right into it. I've already set up a little bit of code. The code that I've currently set up is just, well, a field for the max pluck distance, and I've set that to 4, I believe, but it doesn't do anything yet. What I need to do is I need to make something in some part of the code check if I'm pressing the button to pluck, which is going to be left click, and it'll need to make sure that I'm within range. But also, of course, left click controls a few other things, like throwing, for example, or opening up the onion menu if you're below it. So I need to find that part, which should be in the update function. I would normally split it up into a bunch of different functions, and I may do that at some point, but for now it's just all inside the update function. And so the code that does that is around here. It looks like I was already about to start looping through the sprouts, because I already kind of started working on it. So if I look for the input, okay, that's for about to charge. This is if we're holding something. I don't think we default to holding anything, which means these, I believe, are, okay, that's whistling, that's charging. So where is throwing handled? Because I need to stop throwing, or actually prevent you from being able to throw if you are close enough to a sprout. So I don't quite remember where that is, so give me just a second. Here we go. I remember this being a little bit weird. It's right here. It's not grouped with all this other stuff. I mean, it technically is. It's vaguely close. But yeah, right here. So if we're not under the onion, we're allowed to throw. So I guess what we'd need to do is we need to add another condition where if we're not under the onion and probably not near sprout. So this non-existent variable right here will, I guess, be defined in here. I cannot type. Okay. There we go. And yeah, that will be calculated within here. So we'll only be near a sprout if the distance to the closest sprout is less than that max pluck distance as we established earlier. So I'll go ahead and work on that. Alright, so right here, once this loop is done, I will have a value in the sprout variable that will be set if that sprout is close enough to be plucked. Otherwise it'll be null, which effectively just makes that particular Boolean variable just completely useless, because I could do the same thing on the sprout, because if I try to evaluate a Unity object as a Boolean, it will automatically convert it to true if it's not null, or false if it is null, which is really convenient. So I could just go ahead and test this. So what I'm going to be testing is I'll make some sprouts. Hold on one second. And I will try to throw some Pikmin that I have with me at various distances from these sprouts. And once I'm close enough to a sprout, if that code's working, I shouldn't actually be able to throw. So let me go get a pellet. Actually, it would be much, much faster if I enabled the little debug pellet that's like right next to us, which is gone now. Okay. Never mind, it's over here under this bridge. Okay. So yeah, I can go ahead and grab that pellet, have them bring it back, and it'll make some sprouts. Okay, so actually, I wonder if that code's still going to be in effect if they're in the air. I don't think so. I don't know. I'm not sure what difference it would make, because, again, the distance function, if they're up in the air, they're going to be further away. But anyway, okay, I can try and throw. Nothing's happening. I can try and throw over here. Nothing's happening. So, okay, we seem to have run into this issue where I now cannot throw anywhere, which means I've done something wrong. Okay, let's look at this code again. So sprout should evaluate, wait, am I over here now? Okay, sprout should evaluate to false if it's null, and okay, distance would have to be less than closest sprout distance and less than the max pluck distance for it to even be set. And just to make sure, I'll go to my leader, which is leader 1, and the max pluck distance is 4. So I should reasonably be further than 4 at around, I'd say, this far away. But even past that, I still wasn't able to throw. Did that actually switch windows? I don't know. So what is going wrong here? Oh, well, of course, I completely negated the logic. I don't think I should have gotten rid of that, because if we're not under the onion and there isn't a sprout, not a sprite, then we should be able to throw. So let's just go ahead and test that real quick. And just for good measure, I'm going to go ahead and move that 5 pellet right here, there, right here, and keep it there so that we always have quick access to it. I was moving it over there for testing some changes I made to the pathfinding, which works like Pikmin 1 and 2's pathfinding, where there's just a series of points running along the ground, and they're connected, with edges, kind of like a graph. I don't know what Pikmin 3 does. It might use the same thing, but the point being I chose not to use, like, nav mesh or something like that. So if I try and throw around here, nothing's working. If I try and throw over here, alright, I can throw them now. So how close can I get? Okay. Should I be able to pluck from that distance? I don't know. Because the cutoff is, like, right here. I cannot throw right here, but if I just... Yeah, and it's obviously finding my distance to this sprout because that's the closest. That seems like a reasonable distance to me. So now that it's not letting me throw, I know exactly when I'm pressing the A button and I'm near a sprout, so I can go ahead and start working on the actual logic. So I'm going to do something really basic here. So if the sprout's not null, then we can just go ahead and call its pluck function, right? Like, that seems to make sense to me. I mean, that would mean that we'd have to pluck them all manually. There'd be no automatic plucking. Actually, I think if I kept spamming left click, it would... Is that just how it works in the actual Pikmin games? And that's why they tell you to spam A, because that's just the logical effect it would have based on that logic? It probably is. I do certain things and then I think, man, that's like really similar to how it is in the actual games. And then I think, well, that's probably how they did it, because that's just a simple, easy way to... Well, that... I seem to have forgotten a little bit of logic. They seem to be really eager to jump out at me. So obviously I need to go over here and only do this if sprout and probably and control manager.controls.throwing.down. I guess this would be assuming that the throwing control and the plucking control would always be the same. But just in case I don't want to do that, I should go ahead and make a dedicated plucking control right here. And I should go back to the leader and change that from throwing down to plucking down. I mean, in the games it's always the same, but just in case, I'll make them separate controls. So my control manager is right here, and the plucking control is right here. It's a button, right? Yeah, and its name is... It's a mouse button, and it's 0, right? Let me make sure it's the same as throwing. Yeah, okay. So now, instead of just hopping out of the ground when I get near, I should actually have to press left click now. So let's check that out. Go ahead and do that. I wonder if I should just skip this part. It's quick enough anyway. Can I pluck them while they're in the air? That didn't seem to do anything, so I guess not. Yeah, and if I spam... Yeah, and then... Okay, but I didn't keep moving. So, okay, there's a little bit more logic to it than just that, but plucking vaguely works now, and I have 15, but that's not enough for the 20. So, it kind of works, but the leader just stays in one spot. So now I'll have to think about how to address that. I'll have a variable that keeps track of whether or not we're at least trying to pluck something, and that will become true as soon as we have expressed the desire to do so, which means as soon as we actually I was about to say press the A button, but this is actually clicking left click. So we don't need that anymore. So plucking will be true. And if we have a sprout already determined, we actually probably need to save the sprout, because what I'm thinking we should do is we should keep that sprout, and we should probably call it plucking sprout to, I guess, make it just that much more obvious what it is. When we don't have a sprout that we're actively trying to pluck, we should look for one, obviously. But then, okay, why did I spell it wrong? Yes. Okay, so yeah, if we aren't currently in the process of plucking, which is right there, then we should actually look for a sprout. Otherwise, we want to lock in that reference that we've already gotten. So if we're plucking sprout, if we have a plucking sprout, that's what that means, and we're pressing left click currently, then it'll set that mode to true. We will be in that mode. We will be doing that action, and that is when we should start moving towards the sprout. So this is the code that handles the movement for our character controller. So currently it moves us with motion. I did not enunciate that very well. It moves us with motion. So what I want to do, I think, is probably, if we are in the process of plucking, override motion with something else. So we'll calculate that as the direction we have to move to get close to that sprout. Alright, so that should move us towards it, but that'll just move us towards it forever, and it will never actually pluck. So we need to define a distance under which it will go ahead and pluck the sprout. So we can do that right next to the other relevant variable right here. So that's max pluck distance, and I guess, would I say min pluck distance? Actually, let's just call it pluck distance for now. And we go right back down to where we were with the scroll bar, if I can get it to work. Have we gone far enough? Okay, yeah, we've gone far enough. Motion, there we go. Okay, so I guess what we need to do is, if we're plucking, and if the distance is less than that threshold we specified, just pluck it. Alright, so do I still have that? Okay, no, I have that copied, so that's pretty simple though. Plucking sprout dot pluck, that function we called earlier. But also we want to set plucking to false, since we're now done with that. And this should work. Let's test it. Alright, we're getting some sprouts. Okay, let's go over here. Okay, I was not close enough. Still not close enough. I'm thinking I should expand that distance a little bit, but let's see. Or it's probably just not working. Yeah, it's just not working. Ah, another instance where I have completely reversed the logic by accident. Alright, some sprouts. Okay, so if I just try and throw from over here, okay, and it throws. But if I get about this close, okay, the logic might still... Oh yeah, I never actually set the pluck distance. That'll do it. So, what do we want for the distance? 4 was how close, or the furthest we can possibly be while still being able to go over to it. Pluck distance, let's just do 0.5 actually. Wouldn't that be about our radius? So that should be a good value, because then we'd be right up against it and, at the correct distance to actually pull it out of the ground. That's way too many. So let's try it. I guess I won't skip it this time since I was in the process of talking. Okay. Sprouts. Cool. Nope. Nope, still doesn't work. Huh. Interesting. And, yeah, I obviously set it right here. So, okay, so it's obviously going there. That part's working. This part's working. It's redirecting our motion correctly. But this is not working. So, both our positions are on the ground. Is it not possible for me to actually get that close? Because I think the way I've got it working is the sprouts are actually just Pikmin but with a different model. And of course, the transform for the Pikmin starts at their feet, just like it does for me, which means their transform is actually under the ground. So that might prevent us from actually getting that physically close in 3D space. So in those cases, I usually use Pikmin.flatDistance, which is basically a two-dimensional distance function where it treats everything as being on the XZ plane. And that's useful for a lot of things, but there are certain places where it should not be used, and I've tried to make sure not to use it in those cases, but this seems like a reasonable place to use flat distance. Because, they're just things that are just in the ground. You're always going to be on the ground, more or less. And again, you couldn't start plucking them if you're too high up in the air, because that uses the 3D distance function, so this should be fine. Alright. Okay, and it's, I lose my streak right there because the next ones are too far away. So, obviously there's a little bit more logic, but so far, this is working. I move towards them, I pull them out of the ground, and honestly, that distance could be a little bit longer, because I think our radius might actually be closer to 1. So let me try that out real quick. Get 10 Pikmin, put them on the pellet. Let's see what a distance of 1 looks like. Alright. And just to make sure, I can't pluck them while they're in the air, can I? No, but the leader does try to go to them, which is interesting. Oops, okay. 1 is... Okay, that's not close enough. Actually, what's up with this? Why can't I get these guys? So that's a little bit of a issue. I can't actually pluck these ones. I wonder what's actually going on here. So, I guess the first step is trying to figure out how I can reproduce that. Is it just that position? Was it because I dismissed my Pikmin before plucking them? I guess that's what I gotta find out. Let's go ahead and get 10 out again, like I did last time. Let's just start with something simple. I dismissed my Pikmin before going and plucking. So... Alright, dismiss them. I can pluck that one just fine, and that one, and this one, and this one, and this one. So that's bizarre. That means there's a little bit more to it, which is concerning. I don't like bugs that are very hard to reproduce and very inconsistent, because that makes them way harder to diagnose. But, hey, let's try. This is something I don't usually get to show, is trying to diagnose really obscure bugs like this. So, let's spam it. Okay, spam it. If it's just a one-off thing, that's even more confusing. Because I don't want to just leave it and have the chance that in normal gameplay sometimes you just can't pluck some Pikmin. And if it is that position in particular... Well, how do I prove that? And if it is, then I can't come up with a reason that would be the case. Like, what's special about that position? Is it because it's really close to the legs? That also doesn't really make much sense. So if I can still pluck all of these so far. Man, that kind of sucks. I kind of wish I would have had the forethought to maybe stop and start looking at a bunch of stuff, like the states of variables, but I don't know that many of the variables that are actually exposed would have helped me. I'm sure most of the stuff would be the private behind-the-scenes stuff that I'd want to look at. And that's why it's important to be able to reproduce these bugs, so that I can consistently, set up the scenario and then, put, I guess, breakpoints, which I just turn on error, pause, and throw an error, at certain pieces of the code, see what's going on. Can still pluck. I might just have to look at the footage and I guess try and work on it later. We've got some basic plucking so far, but I actually want it to be automatic. In Pikmin 3, I like the way Pikmin 3 does it. You press A when you're next to a sprout to start plucking, and the leaders just keep going. And that's another thing, actually. I haven't tested what this does if I actually have other leaders with me, so I'm going to test that. I mean, in theory, from what I think I know about the code that I just wrote, they shouldn't do anything. So if I go ahead and make some sprouts, because yeah, if they're not actually under player control, they wouldn't do anything, would they? Yeah, they're not doing anything. And I guess that's fine for now. I can work on that later. So, I guess ignoring that really weird one-off bug where you couldn't pluck Pikmin, I guess I'll move on to the automatic pluck. So I guess one way to go about it is, instead of turning plucking off, I could look for the next sprout that's closest to me, and that is done right here, but that's only done if we're not plucking. So if I get rid of that constraint, it would just do it all the time, which would mean it would actively change as I'm moving around. But let's just see what that looks like. Alright, here we are, and I guess I'll dismiss them again. Let's see how this works. Oh, okay. Problem. Big problem. Okay. Null reference exception. Interesting. Okay. It's here. I don't need the red Pikmin script. Okay, so I'm guessing the plucking sprout would be null, because it would be really weird if my script was null. I've had that happen before on other projects. That was weird. That was actually that weird bug I was talking about in the Chain Playground game dev session, or one of the things that I didn't mention, but that's what it was. This reference was null suddenly. I don't know what that was about, but anyway, obviously plucking sprout's null, and of course it's going to be null. So okay, yeah, plucking can only be true if that's not null. And we're pressing the button, so why might that happen? Actually, that happened early. So if I clear that out... No, it's just constantly null. Because there are definitely two other sprouts that could be plucked, so... That's strange. And I'm actually in the process of working on this one, I'm guessing. Is it just... Okay, he's actually coming out of the ground, so if I just... Yeah, he's coming out of the ground. How long is that going to be an issue for? Just forever? I think that's a forever issue. Yeah, that's not going away. Okay, so... Interesting what's going on here. While I'm not entirely sure what's going on here, I think I'm just going to go ahead and ramp up the functionality for finding the closest sprout in its own function. Alright, so this is the function, and I have my own plucking sprout variable defined in here, and it looks like it's not messing with that one, which is what I want. I kind of want that to be a pure-ish function, I guess, which means, where did I actually just remove that from? That's weird. I sure don't see. Okay, around here, I think. I think I was doing it probably right here. So that's interesting. It also only does it when it's player controlled. I'll probably get back to that later. So instead, yeah, if we're not actually plucking a sprout at all, then we want plucking sprout to become the get closest one. And then what we can do is we can just call it again up here instead of setting plucking to false. And actually, let's say plucking equals plucking sprout. So if there is none left, we're actually not plucking anymore. So that might have been the issue, but then again, there were two Pikmin over here that couldn't be plucked, so maybe that was that bug resurfacing. It's too bad that I was kind of halted by a different bug and couldn't investigate. So, if it is a random chance thing, well, it couldn't be random chance. It's always got to be caused by something. So, I guess... Okay, just did those two automatically. So if I keep... Okay, so yeah, it's not happening automatically. So, what I'm wanting to happen is if I'm in the process of plucking, it takes me to the nearest one, and once I am near it, I pluck that one, get the closest sprout, and, well, the process should continue because that shouldn't ever be null. But I guess it would be worth it to just check. So I'm going to check just in case. So let's run through that again. And one thing I'm wondering is if the pluck function on the Pikmin actually takes it out of the list of sprouts. I'm pretty sure it should. I don't see any reason that it wouldn't, because I feel like I would remember that. In fact, I'd have to. Yeah, and I actually do remember doing that, so. Unless my memory is actually failing me. Let's see what's going on. And it is indeed null. That is concerning. Okay, so yeah, get closest sprout. It's giving me null for that. But obviously not for the first time, because I obviously was able to walk over to one of the sprouts. So why might that be happening? So get sprouts. Okay. So distance is less than closest sprout distance, and that's going to start at infinity, and the distance... Okay. So, yeah, I'm not actually close enough to any of them. So, what I'll do... I'll make a chain boolean. So, what I'll do... is this will be the base condition. Is that it's closer. So this will just find a sprout. But we only want to exclude far away sprouts if we're not in a chain, which means we're chaining together plucks. So how would I want to do that? Okay, let's think about this logically. If chain is false, we want this to just be true no matter what. So, and not chain. So this will have to be true no matter what. So if it's not, this and means nothing else will be processed, which is good. But if it is true, then we move on to not chain. So if not chain, which is how it will be initially, then that will automatically be true. So that OR will not be evaluated. So what we actually want to do, I think, is AND. So then we're just going to assume this is true. If not chain, like when the function will be first called, when we're actually first pressing left click, that's true, but that will mean this over here will also have to be true. But if chain is true, then that will be false, which will make the whole thing false. So that's a problem. I need to come up with different logic because that's not going to work. So if I OR that and not this, does this actually do what I want? Let's walk through the logic again. So on the first left click, chain will be false, which means and not false, which is true. So that won't even evaluate. So actually, we actually need to make that chain. So chain will be false. So and chain, just in case the order of operations gets confused. And it looks like it would have been, since it's not telling me these parentheses are useless. So chain is normally false, or so actually we would want the distance to be less than the max pluck distance. Otherwise, both would be false. If both are false, then this whole thing's going to be false. We don't actually want that sprout. But if chain is true, it won't even evaluate this because it doesn't need to, since that's OR. So let's see if that worked. No, it didn't compile. What? No, oh, yeah, duh. True, because we want to chain. False, because we don't yet. Now, let's actually try it. So, hopefully that headache that I gave myself trying to figure out how to structure that if statement is paid off. This is actually working. Let's try it. Okay. So far, so good. I mean, the base game still works. So if I do that... That was fast. That was actually incredibly fast. Okay, so obviously there's a delay while you're plucking the Pikmin for it to come out of the ground, so I guess I'll do that. I mean, this video is already really long, so I think this will be the last thing I do for this episode, and maybe I'll split it into multiple parts. So, now I just want a delay. So, where is the code in question over here that moves on to the next Pikmin? I am too far up. Right here. So, this, I guess, event is, well, the event that moves us on to the next sprout. So, we're already moving on to the next one once this code is finished executing. But we actually want the leader to pause for a moment here. So how do I want to do that? So I'll make a boolean called waiting for finish pluck. So that will mean we are actually in the process of pulling a Pikmin out of the ground, but we're waiting for that to be done. So in that thing over here, we're just going to go ahead and set that to true. And we don't actually want this code to happen yet. What we want to do is we want to start a timer. So I guess we'd have a pluck time, and we'd set that to time.time right here. So let's go ahead and make that variable up here. So actually, why am I putting that stuff up here? Well, I don't know, whatever. So that would be the pluck time, which means we now need an exposed variable for how long the pluck should last. Again, I'll put this around here with these relevant variables. So we'll do pluck duration right there, and we'll move down to where I saw an error for a second, which should be where that code was, because for a second it wouldn't have compiled, which is okay. Found it. So waiting for finish pluck is true, pluck time is true. So if I guess we'll just actually no, still in the same if statement. If we're waiting for finish pluck and the current time minus the pluck time, that's not a time variable, is greater than or equal to the pluck duration, then for one, we're no longer waiting for the pluck to finish, but we're also going to do this code that we were putting off. So that will go ahead and go to the next sprout. So now all we have to do is come up with a delay in seconds. So if I'm just playing this over in my head, let's just try half a second. That sounds vaguely like how long it might take in the actual games, and I think it varies depending on the game. I think Pikmin 1 was the slowest. I went back to play Pikmin 1. I noticed a lot of things were way slower than I was used to, and I noticed that in Pikmin 3 a lot of things were way faster than I was used to. So, okay. Wow. Whoa. Okay. Wow. That was fascinatingly broken. There's a Pikmin floating into the sky right now, right? That's where I saw him going. Yeah, that's right. That was beautiful. But why? Okay, that's the highlight of my day right there. But let's figure out what's happening. So we're plucking the sprout. Oh, we're going to be doing that constantly. So if we're not waiting, then we can pluck it. We were plucking it every single frame. Huh, interesting. I guess that's just an example of, what happens if you call a function that expects to only be called once every frame. It does that right there. I mean, it looked hilarious, but it was not the intended behavior. There are only so many bugs that I can pass off as Easter eggs. Alright. The leader is really not happy with waiting. The leader seems like really on edge. Okay, so that's obvious what's going on. So this should be pretty simple. So let's just go ahead and put this in parentheses just in case. So if we're waiting for pluck, then our desired motion is going to be 0, just completely 0. So obviously we were still trying to go towards the nearest Pikmin, but we kept overshooting because, we still had our full speed. We didn't even slow down a bit. And since everything's discrete in the world of video games, well, yeah. Alright. Here we go. I'm just getting rid of these guys just to make it a little bit less crowded. So if I do that... That's brilliant, except for the fact that I moonwalk sometimes. Okay. So, I'm sure I'm running out of time on this video. Yeah, this is getting really long, but this will be the last thing. So, I specifically have something that turns me, so when I'm trying to go somewhere. So, let's hijack that instead. Alright, if player controlled. Okay, we have a target move right here. So, else, if not... Actually, would it be... Yeah, that. Else, let's set the target move instead of motion. So, we don't need that if plucking, because that's effectively the condition that is in effect in this else statement. Right? Yeah, have to be. I'm gonna assume it would be. So, we're no longer setting motion, we are setting target move. So, that's actually, how many times do I reference motion? Just once. Alright, and it just normalizes it anyway. So, there's actually no point in doing all this speed calculation right here. Yeah. Okay. So now I should actually, hopefully, turn to look at whatever I'm going to pluck instead of moonwalking 50% of the time. I mean, statistically, it would have to... Actually, no. I don't know. Why am I trying to put statistics into this? This is completely pointless and arbitrary. And I'm kind of on a schedule right now, so... Alright, let's see. I can no longer pluck. Fascinating. Fascinating. Okay, so... Probably shouldn't have assumed on this condition. So... Well, oh, player controlled. And not plucking. So, yeah. So now that should do it, and I'll finally, hopefully, be done with this episode. I mean, I'd like to go way longer, but it's already almost 40 minutes, which is quite a lot to watch. I'm not entirely sure how it got to 40 minutes. Is there some part of this recording that's way longer than it should be? Okay, that was great. How do you normally cancel? Because I actually didn't even know about the automatic plucking in Pikmin 3. I just kept pressing A. How did I cancel it? I'll get to that in the next episode, actually, because I really need to wrap this up. Yeah, it's almost 40 minutes. If you watched this far, thank you, like, a lot. And also, I noticed, been getting a recent influx in subscribers. Not sure why, but whatever, cool. But anyway, yeah, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next video, and bye.